Hello, my name is Carol Davenport and I'm going to talk to you today about children's early career aspirations as part of the Let's Do Engineering project. I'm based at Northumbria University in Newcastle. Think back to when you were young and thinking about what you wanted to do when you grew up. You might have had a really clear idea of what you wanted to do, or you might have had no idea at all until you actually started working. At Northumbria University, we wanted to find out actually what career aspirations do children have when they are quite young. We asked 300 children who are aged between 8 and 11, what would you like to be when you grow up? And we asked them to tell us 3 different things that they might want to do. And when we looked at those career aspirations, there were a number of things that we found. The first is that the most common jobs that children named were those that they see people around them doing. The aspirations were limited to a very small number of jobs. The top 20 jobs accounted for 75% of the named jobs. And children's career aspirations are gendered from a very early age. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that now. So if we look at the top 10 jobs named by boys and top 10 jobs named by girls, I've got them on this slide. You'll notice that there are only 16 jobs named, and that's because 4 of them were common between boys and girls. And I'm fairly sure if I asked you to separate these out into jobs that boys would want to do and jobs that girls would want to do, you'd be able to do that fairly straightforwardly. Just have a think about that now. So if we look at the jobs that boys and girls wanted to do, there were 4 of them. They wanted to be teachers, a YouTuber, a streamer, a police, or somebody that played sport. If we look at the girls' aspirations, we see vet, doctor, nurse, artist, working in hair and beauty, or being a musician and singer. And if we looked at the boys' aspirations, we saw that they wanted to be a footballer, armed forces, working in the armed forces, or in construction, firefighter, or being a driver. So you can see that although there are some shared aspirations, there are also quite different aspirations. If we look at STEM jobs and what were the most common STEM jobs amongst the jobs that the children named, then top 4 were vet, doctor, scientist and nurse, and this is the percentage of times that they were named. However, if we then also look at what jobs, STEM jobs, boys and girls wanted to do, we found that STEM job choice is also gendered. So at the age of 8, health and life science jobs made up 91% of girls' STEM aspirations, but only 40% of STEM aspirations for boys. There are a lot of STEM jobs that were named, and I've got some on here. There's a lot of different jobs, and you can see that actually children named quite a number of different jobs. But if we look at what jobs boys named and what jobs girls named, you can see here that the careers in red were named by both boys and girls, but the careers in black were named only by boys. So what we can see from this is that for some children, the possibilities that they are thinking about even when they're very young is much broader than for other children, and on the whole we can say that the girls are thinking about a much narrower range of STEM careers. Other research by a group called the Aspirations project has found that when you ask children when they're age 11 and follow them through, the career choices and the career sectors that they're thinking about when they're young tends to stay all the way through. So if children are ruling out STEM careers by the age of 8, then it's likely that they're going to rule those careers out all the way through up to when they're making career decisions at age 14, 15, 16. So it's really important that we broaden the range of careers that children are thinking about from a very young age, because by the age of 8 some of those decisions have already been made and children are limiting what they might want to do. I'd like us to think a little bit about what might be causing those gendered choices. And there's a theory called circumscription and compromise by Linda Gottfredson, and she talks about how children's self-concept develops over time. So when children are very young, there's a cognitive growth phase, And children classify people according to simple distinctions, big and powerful, little and weak. And children are starting to think about occupations as adult roles, and mostly stopped saying that they'd like to be animals or fantasy characters or inanimate objects. Although, to be fair, we did talk to a 6-year-old who still wanted to be a fire engine. As children then get a little bit older, so age 6 to 8, they're starting to orient themselves to gender roles, and they quite often police how children behave. And if you've been around young children, you'll know that some children rule out toys that they'll play with because they think it's not for people like them. And children are starting to think about career aspirations, about concrete, visible attributes. Who do they see doing those jobs? What sort of person is it, and is that person like them? And at this point, naive early understandings have already turned them towards some possible futures and away from others. And in some ways, it doesn't matter if they've got the wrong end of the stick, if they've misunderstood a career. If they've internalised that idea, then it's very hard to change that. So working with children before the age of 6, when they're still quite open to different ideas, is really important, and that's partly why the Let's Do Engineering project is working with such young children and their families. This goes beyond this project, but as children get older, they start to rule things out. They become aware of status, what jobs are high status, what jobs are low status, what attainment they need to have for different jobs, and they start ruling things out. And then when they get towards the top of secondary level, they start making compromises. They want to be a doctor, but recognise they're not going to get the grades to get in, so they want to do biomedical science instead. So this is the circumscription and compromise theory, which help us to think about what choices children might be making and why those career choices may be coming around. There are other things that are causing those gender choices that help frame the ideas that children have. And some of those are societal and familial expectations. Children pick up what the world around them is like and how they should behave from the moment they're born. We treat children differently depending on whether we think they're a boy or a girl from a very, very early age. And familial expectations, the parents have an idea of what they think what the child should do, what they would like the child to do. Oh, she's really good with her hands, just like her Uncle Jack. Maybe she's going to be a mechanic like him. That kind of thing. There are stereotypes. Who is represented? What are people shown doing? And there's also unconscious bias. It might be that when we're talking about people, we refer, say, for example, to all engineers as he, all nurses as she. And that unconscious bias that we've picked up from our stereotypes in the world around us reinforce those roles that children think are appropriate, and furthermore limit the choices that they're making. There's a whole other session we could do on unconscious bias, but not today. So what can we do about this? We need to think about the assumptions that we might unconsciously make about the types of activities different children prefer. And it goes well beyond boys and girls. It goes, for example, active children and quiet children. What different activities? Are we assuming that because of how a child behaves that they will like one activity or another? Try and make them as inclusive as possible. Think about the language that you use to talk to children or that you include in activities. Are you referring to things in a particular way that might reinforce stereotypes? It's also worthwhile avoiding language like girls are just as good at boys at, as this appears to reinforce stereotypes rather than challenge them. We'd also recommend at NUSTEM that you avoid the use of the word guys, although a lot of people will say that it's gender neutral. If I asked you to draw a group of guys, you probably wouldn't include any girls in there. So if you're talking to a group of children and you go, "Hey guys," then you may unconsciously be excluding some children, and that's something that we want to avoid. And if we're using images, make sure that they represent a broad range of people. try and use counter-stereotypical images, or use images of more than one type of person when you're showing your job or your career. So I hope I've shown you that some of the career aspirations that young children have, and why it's important to broaden the range of career aspirations that very young children have, and to support their parents so that their parents know about different jobs as well. There's a lot more information about this topic, and if anybody is interested to read further, these 4 books, they're particularly interesting and will give you more about particularly the gendering of careers, but also the biases that we might have. If you have any questions, feel free to just get in touch. Thank you very much.